Hello, this is Rich, and today there's going to be something very exciting. I think a lot of you people will like. It's going to be a first tutorial on, I believe on the net, on how to use, with the new SDK version that just came out of CryEngine 3 just a few days ago, on implementing your own UI, your own, basically like a HUD or menu. I don't think there's any other tutorials on the web that shows how to do this in respects to the newest update in their implementation of scale form. But I'm going to jump into CryEngine, the editor, and show you what I have accomplished. It's something very basic, very simple. I just accomplished it myself, but I'm going to show you how to get something very simple into CryEngine and get like a button working to control your scene. So just take a look and see if you like it or not, and then I'm also going to do a tutorial in this same video to show you how to do that. Just so you know, you're going to need Adobe Flash. It does cost money. I have the 30-day trial, so you can do that as well. Just go to adobe.com and then download their Adobe Flash CS5 and 30-day trial if you want to follow this tutorial. This new build is a 3.39 or 3.3.9. It's the newest one here. It's pretty amazing so far. But you do need to have the newest version of CryEngine in order to follow this tutorial as the newest version implemented scale form. So I'm just going to open up. Boom, boom. Open this up here, and I'm just going to show you. And like I said, it's very simple, but it's the basic idea of getting UI elements into your game and having the UI elements interact with your world. Hey, sweetheart, can you get me a soda, please? Yeah. Thanks. Alright, this is just the standard level that I had before. I ended up putting a camera here. That way I can have a static view instead of being able to move around. I took away the guns that I have. So I'm going to jump right in game, and immediately you're going to notice that there's a button that's in the middle of my screen. And this is the UI element that I was talking about that I made in Flash that we're going to make. And when I push it, it's going to basically take this box right here, and it's going to add an impulse to it. And it's going to basically physicalize the box to be pushed this way every time I push that button. And it's also going to display some text up in the left-hand corner that says button pressed. So I'm going to push Control-G to jump in game. Right now you're going to see there's no button. I'm going to tap M on my keyboard because I told it to show the button when I press M and hide it when I press it again. So I'm going to press M, and you're going to see that there's a button now, and if I hover over it, it turns red. Not on it, it's just default gray, as you can see here. And when I click it, notice this box is going to be pushed over here, and there's going to be a button. I'm going to click. There we go. Look up at left-hand corner, button pressed, and every time I press it, it's going to keep on going. If I push M on my keyboard, the button goes away. So no matter what I do, no matter what I press, nothing's going to happen. Push M again on my keyboard, there we go. So basically that's getting a UI element into your game. It's very extremely basic, but it just shows you how to do it. Then you're going to have to use your brain, obviously, to get more, advanced things in. But I'm really excited to do this for you guys, and I think you guys like it quite a bit. So let's get going. First of all, we're going to open up our Flash to create. I'm going to open up Flash so that we can create the document. And so I'm going to push Escape. I'm going to close my CryEngine. Okay, here. All right. See, Adobe Flash Professional CS 5.5. I'm just going to open up. I do anticipate this tutorial being about an hour, hour and a half, because there's a lot to cover. And as you guys know, I am very in-depth, at least I try to be. And considering I'm not a programmer, I've said that a million times, there are going to be a lot. Because somebody left a comment on one of my videos that it was pretty constructive. I like that comment. It says that I didn't have quite good explanations for programming functions and stuff like that. And that's because I honestly don't know much. So if I get it wrong, those of you who do know programming, just correct me so I can learn, because I would love to learn, to better myself. And for those who don't know, basically, when it comes to programming, don't take everything I say as fact. So if you want to learn to program, pretty much do not take everything I say to fact. You can take some of my information and look it up to, look it up for the facts yourself. But just a disclaimer, I do not know very much, so I may get things wrong quite often. But it's just basically an idea of how to. All right then, once this is open, I'm just going to hit continue trial. And first thing we're going to do is, I do not know if the new scale form in CryEngine uses ActionScript 3 support or ActionScript 2. I do know that last time I used ActionScript 2 to do my scale form UI. So we're just going to go ahead and create a new ActionScript 2.0. Once we do this, we're going to be greeted with and I've never used Flash, by the way. It's my first time using this program as well. Well, I used it once before. I did a short tutorial on the web to find out how to do basic things. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and you're going to see on the right hand side Flash Player 10.2. You're going to click on that and make sure it's Flash Player 8 for compatibility reasons. And then ActionScript, yes, you want 2.0. And for the publish settings, you're going to go ahead and click that. And then you're going to, when you save your file to be ready to be put into CryEngine, this is the name that's going to have. So it's going to be a .swf, that is the compiled save version, file format I mean. So I'm just going to name this, we want this to be a button that does something. So we're just going to go test_button, test button. And that's all we pretty much need to do here. And click OK. And under the properties, you're going to see here, if we go into the settings, you can set the dimensions of your document. Because most people use 1080p monitors, we're going to go ahead and set the actual, the screen. This is basically called the stage, this black area. This is the viewport that everything happens within. So people usually have a 1080p resolution. So we're just going to go ahead and create a dimensions of 1920 by 1080, and it's going to be pixels and default, and everything should be fine. Oh, for frame rate, we're going to want to choose 30. You're going to click on this and then type in 30. Although you can do 60 frames per second, I heard somewhere, I'm not sure on the accuracy of this, but I heard somewhere using 60 frames per second can actually slow it down a little bit. So you can put 30 here. After that's done, just push OK. Now you're pretty much ready to get going on building what you need to. So first off, we're going to make the button. This is the button we need to, we're going to make the button. If you look on the right hand side, you're going to see something here called the rectangle tool. We're going to click on that, and we're just going to draw out a button by left clicking and dragging, just like that. We have a button. Actually, it's a visual representation of a button. It doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't have function. Basically, Flash looks at it as just a shape that you did without any functions applied to it or anything like that. If we want to change the color of the button, we can go ahead and click on this little bucket symbol here, and then we can just change the color. We can change it to red. Actually, whoops, that was my bad. My bad. Go to the select tool, which is right here. Then you can click on your button, and then you can go and click on the bucket tool, and let's see, we can change it to a red. See, it's red. But I just like to have mine gray, just like that. And I just clicked on the stage, left clicked on the stage to deselect my object here.
Change background of
Oh, if you click on the background of the stage here, this is called, again, this is the stage, the viewport basically, where everything happens. You can also change the color of the viewport, just like that. But I'm going to leave it black. But you can change that. All right, let me think here, because this is only my second time. Okay, then you're going to want to double click on your button. Oops. Oh, my bad. You're going to want to right now we're on the main layer, but we want this button to be on a different layer than the stage. So we're going to want to go here, see layer 1, we're on layer 1 currently. We're going to click this button here. It says new layer. We're going to create a new layer, and now we're in layer 2. Oops, my bad. So we're going to make sure we click on layer 2. Then we're going to create some text. This is the text that's going to be on this button here. We don't need it, but it's just cool to have some text on it to let you know what it does. First of all, we're going to right click on this object here, this button. We're going to right click, and this is the process of making it a button. We're going to right click, and then you're going to see convert to symbol. You want to convert it to symbol. Then you're going to name what you want the symbol to be. And I'm just going to call it B-U-T-T-O-N, button. And I'll say button 1. And then the type, you want it to be a button, obviously, button. And then just don't worry about anything else, just click on OK. Now this is actually a button. So let's go to layer 2, and we're going to create some text. You can see this T here. This allows you to make some text. We're going to click on it, and we're going to change the color of the text to a white color. And we're going to left click on the button, and it allows us to put some text in. I'm just going to type in button 1, and then I'm going to left click to get out of that, just like that. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the select tool. We're going to select this button here because we want to center this. We'll align it to the middle of the screen. So once I've selected that button, this icon right here is the align button, and you just click on it. Make sure you align it to the stage again. This is the stage, so it's going to align this button to the stage, and we want to align it in the horizontal center, and we also want to align it to the vertical center. Now the button is exactly in the middle. You don't have to do this. Again, this is just something I like to do for being nice and neat and having it aligned properly. Secondly, we're going to want to take this button and we're going to want to align it to this text and align it to the button. So we're going to go ahead and click on the button, hold Control, Shift. Click on the text, hold Shift, click on the button. Then we're going to go to Align tool, and then we're going to click off Align to Stage because we don't want it to align to stage. We want it to align it with the second object we clicked, and align to horizontal, and align to vertical. Just like that. Maybe align it just like that. Now everything's aligned properly. Okay. Now that we got the button here, let me just go ahead and take on this 100% here. This is how, basically, let's just show you here, 50%. It's still 1920 by 1080. You just zoomed out basically so you can see everything by 50%. It's viewing it as 50% of what it actually is, but it still remains at 1920 by 1080. Okay. we can go to debug to test out our application. Debug movie in Flash Player Professional. We just close out of this pop-up window, and you can see that this is your actual application. If I put my mouse over it, you can see that it turns into a pointer finger, showing you that you can click it in a button. You can click all you want. Nothing will happen. Nothing will change. It won't like turn a different color when you click. You also notice that it doesn't even change color. So that's your application so far. But we actually want to have the button change color as when we go over it. And let's see, I forgot how to actually do this. But just hang with me. Just hang with me. Because this is a symbol, because we created it to a button, let's show you. All I did was double click it because it's a symbol now, because we converted it to a symbol. I just double clicked it and it brought me to a different timeline. And you can see that the button has different states. This in the layer panel, because we're actually in the button properties because we double clicked it, we can see that it has an up state, an over state, a down state, and a hit state. Up is when the button is not even pressed. Over is when you mouse is over the object, what happens. Down is when the button is actually being pressed. It's when the button is down. This is what happens here. And when it's hit, when you actually tap the button, what happens. So we want basically the button to stay the color it is. But when we hover the mouse over it, you want to change the button color. So go ahead into the over and down and hit by holding control and selecting these three. We're going to right click and we are going to convert to keyframes. This converts to keyframes. Just know that you have to do that in order to make the color change. So up is going to be default. So when we're over, we're going to click on the button. See, we clicked on the over, and we clicked on the button again. Now we're going to change the color to a red. Now if I see it turned red. But when I go back to the up, you can see that it's gray. When it's over, it's red. When it's down, it's gray because we didn't tell it to do anything to down, and by default it's gray. And that's pretty much all we want to do here. Now, if we go over to the debug movie in Flash Player, close out of this, you can see when we hover over it, it turns red. Just like that, because we had on the event on over that the color of it's red. That's how you change the color. And if I click on it, you can see when it's down, it's gray again. Click, gray, unclick, red. Click, gray, unclick, red. That's how these states work. And I converted it to a keyframe so that the reason why I converted to keyframes is because it remembers the states that you are. Like an animation with keyframes, at a certain point in time or a certain key, the position is 1 point, in the animation. It basically saves the state. That's how it goes. So the button still doesn't do anything, but we ended up visually changing it, just like that. And then because we're actually inside of the button object, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the scene 1 up here in the left-hand corner. This brings us back to our main scene. If I click on this, double click again, it brings us into our button 1. That's where we are, button 1. I click scene, we're back in scene. Okay. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to add functionality to our button. And this is functionality to our button. And this is controlled through scripting, ActionScript. So in layer 1, let's see. Yes, our button is in layer 1. So we're going to create the script in layer 1 because the button, script we want to use with the button, so we have to create the script on the same layer here. This is the first key, which is right here. So on the very first key on the layer 1, you right click and you go to actions. This brings up the programming dialog where you can program functionality. first thing we're going to do before we actually start programming, I just left clicked on my button and it says instance name. You want to name this all the time. Each of your symbols, different things, you want to name them to have a proper name. And I'm just going to name this button 1, just like that. This is not a programming guide to ActionScript, so that's because I really don't know, but I found this on a website through a tutorial. If you need to know how to do ActionScript, you can surely go ahead and find a tutorial that's way better than mine for ActionScript. I don't know, but we have to. Right now, we're creating the functionality to the button. Now, here's the deal here. This is button 1. This is why we named it. The instance name is button 1. So we're going to we want to put a function on press, meaning when we press the button, we want something to happen. So we got to type in button 1, B-U-T-T-O-N, because that's what we named it. That's why it's important that we name it. And then we're going to push dot, and then we're going to go to on press lowercase o-n, capital P-R-E-S, equals button 1 dot on press equals function, just like that. Enter. We're going to have an opening curly bracket, and then when I push enter, it automatically ended the closing curly bracket that it needed. Inside here, this is what CryEngine actually needs for it to actually read your function in your Flash file, and that is fscommand, fs command, and then it needs a parameter, or sorry, a command. And this actually isn't needed for our tutorial, but this function does need a name of the fs command in parentheses. We're not going to be using this name at all, but the function just will complain if it doesn't have it. So we're just going to call it add impulse, just like that. And this name does not mean anything anything whatsoever. It just needs something, and because we're going to be adding impulses when we press a button, I just put add impulse here as the parameter to the fs command. So basically, just to overview, it's a very simple line of code. Button 1 on press, because we need to know what button we want to activate a function on, we put in button 1. So the on press event is going to happen when we press button 1, because we said button 1 dot on press. That's why we needed the button 1. We needed a name for that button so we can refer to it in our script. So the on press function is going to be done on the button. That way, if I had two different buttons and I clicked on this button that was button 2, it wouldn't call this event because this is button 1. But if I clicked on button 1, the event this function would happen because it's called on button 1. So just to be clear, if we have 3 buttons, button 1, button 2, and button 3, if I click on button 3, this event wouldn't happen because it's referring to button 1. If I clicked on button 2, this fs command wouldn't happen because we have it referring to button 1 being pressed. That's the basic idea. So when button 1 is pressed, do this, do an fs command. And this is a CryEngine specific here. This is what CryEngine reads, an fs command. And we added a name parameter here in opening, closing brackets and parentheses here. Add impulse. You can name whatever you want here. After that's done, we're going to close out because that's all the button functionality we will need. Okay. Now we're going to get a little bit fancier, and we're going to create a mouse cursor. Could debug movie. We're going to go ahead and test it. You're going to see it's just a default mouse cursor. But what if we want to have a special mouse, something that looks really cool? Or this tutorial is going to show you how to make something really cool, but it's going to be cooler than a standard mouse. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to the Shapes tool right here, and we're going to create another shape. just like that. Then we're going to go into the select tool, and we're going to select just the corner of this and bring it halfway. See, I just basically edited the shape. Then I'm going to take this corner and just going to edit the shape. I'm going to take this corner and I'm going to edit the shape, and then I'm going to take the middle of this and click and drag up, and there we go. We have a different shape, just like that. Now again, this has no functionality, so it only looks at the Flash only looks at it as just a shape. It doesn't know that we want it to be a mouse, and we have to write the script for that. And actually, the script is very simple as well. Just like the button is very simple. First of all, we're going to want to right-click, and we're going to want to convert to symbol. And for the symbol, we're just going to call it cursor, C-U-R-S-U-R. I don't know, C-U-R-S-O-R, cursor. You can name it whatever you want. Instead of button, it's going to be a movie clip. Don't ask me why, but this mouse does need to be a movie clip. And just click on OK. So now we want to right-click it because it's a symbol. We can go ahead and add some scripts to it. And for actions, for the scripts, we're going to write on clip event enter frame, just like that. Again, don't ask me why. I'm not a ActionScript programmer, but you do need to write this here. I would offer additional information on why if I knew why, but I don't. So on clip event enter frame. I can explain what it does though. What this means is that when the mouse enters the stage, so my mouse is right here, it's not in the stage, but when my mouse enters the stage, it's going to do something. That's what on clip event enter frame means. I think enter frame means it's entering the frame, as in entering the stage. That's basically what it does. And we're going to add the opening and closing brackets right here. So when the mouse enters the stage, we want to underscore x equals underscore x dot mouse I do not know. Hold on a second, guys. I'm just going to save it and look at my other script. Sorry, because it is still my first time here. We're going to go to File, Save. And while we're at it, we'll just save it where we're supposed to for CryEngine to read it. And it saves as a FLA document. And we're going to name it button TEST. And we're going to save in the CryEngine build game, and you can save it anywhere within the game directory, anywhere within the game directory or subfolders. So game my files, and I have a folder called scale form, and I'm going to go ahead and save. File, open, and I'm just going to open my other document. By the way, we can view this document here. This is what you saw in CryEngine earlier. Debug movie in Flash Player. Close this out. You can see it's the exact same thing that was in CryEngine. So basically, you can look at it as whatever happens inside of your Flash document is what happens in CryEngine. So there we go. Now, if I click on this, nothing's going to happen. But in the scripts, we told it to, when we click on it, to do an FS command and add impulse. What happens is when we click this in CryEngine, that fs command is forwarded to the engine. It says, okay, button was pressed, and there's an fs command. The engine says there's an fs command saying add impulse. Then we tell it through CryEngine what add impulse does to our world. That's why we need that add impulse parameter, the fs command. So although Flash doesn't do that fs command when we press the button, it forwards it to CryEngine, and CryEngine needs to know what happens when that happens. So that's the deal. That's why we need that fs command, because that fs command is handled through CryEngine, not Flash. All this does here is it forwards that fs command to CryEngine, and then CryEngine decides what to do with that fs command add impulse. So let me just click on this and then go to actions here. Here we go. That's exactly what I needed. Copy. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know it can save two different documents. Okay. Right click. Go to actions. And that was close. And this is what it means. So when the mouse, this is what this code means. Again, I can't give you any more information on how it works, except for when your mouse enters the actual stage, it takes your X position of the actual mouse, and it takes, basically, it makes this object here follow your mouse. So we're on this object, we're giving it a variable X and a variable Y. This is the position. We're giving the symbol here a variable position of X and a variable position of Y on this position. And then this right here basically tells it to feed our actual mouse position to the position here and to the Y position of the actual mouse and feed it here. So basically that symbol here, this little mouse thing, will follow your mouse around. That's what happens. This object will follow wherever your mouse is. That's all this event does. And we can just close out. There's no need to save. You can just close out of those scripts. It automatically saves it. So let's go ahead and let's just save it just like that. And let's go to the debug movie in Flash Player, close out of this, and you can see that our mouse follows our actual mouse, just like this. And if you see, it's kind of lagging behind the actual mouse because our mouse is running at a 60 frames per second, because that's what my computer does, for Windows. And the actual Flash document is running at 30 frames, so the 30 frames is slower. You won't actually know that it's lagging because this actual mouse, the white mouse here, it won't show up in CryEngine. It'll just be this red mouse, so you won't know that it's lagging behind the actual mouse. It'll just seem a little bit slower than usual. And just like that, we have that basically a custom mouse. Pretty cool, I think. Because the white mouse is pretty ugly. This is pretty ugly too, but it gives you a way of making a custom mouse. You can actually go into Photoshop and create a picture of a nice looking mouse, bring that picture into the stage, and then convert that picture into a symbol and put the same script on it, and now you have that as a custom mouse. It's just pretty damn cool. That would be there seems to be an error in our script. Nope, not that script. Oh, my bad. This is an issue here. You cannot do this with this particular script I have here. This is button 1. That's the name of the button. And what I did was I clicked on the button, right-clicked, and then I put this script on it. Because this is already button 1 and I created the script directly on the button, I can't add button 1 because it already knows what button it is because I'm actually applying the script to the button. That's why it's not going to work. If I go ahead and I click check syntax, you're going to see here, statement must appear within on handler, and it's inappropriate. This will not work. I will show you if you want to put the actual script on the button, you can. Unfortunately, by putting the script onto the button, you can't get it to work with CryEngine. But this is just, for instance, you can type in on, and then in parentheses, pressed, just like that. And if I check my syntax, error goes away. So this code right here is correct if it's applied directly to the button, but I haven't found a way to get this code to work with CryEngine. Paste. And this code is correct if this code is applied to your entire document and not a specific button. So I got to right click, I got to cut it, and now this button has no scripts. And I'm on layer 1 here. Layer 1. And I'm going to right click on this first keyframe here. This first little, this little, 1, 5, 10. It's the first frame. Right click, actions, paste the script there. And if I check my syntax, it's correct because it's on the whole document. So it's referring to button 1. There we go. Now the script is correct. So debug movie. There we go. And it works nice and beautifully. Perfect. Now the button does something. The mouse is your own custom mouse, but the button won't do anything in Flash program because the function doesn't really do anything for Flash. It basically, again, it forwards that, when you click the button, it forwards that FS command to CryEngine, and then CryEngine decides what happens with that command. Basically, you define that what happens with that function in CryEngine, not in Flash. And close out of that. Now that we've actually done it, you make sure you save. Remember, we saved it in the CryEngine directory. And then we're also going to publish. And when you click publish, it's going to put, okay, file, publish. And when you click publish, first of all, it's going to be a .swf, if you remember correctly, file. And it's going to publish it the same directory as you saved your Flash file. So that's why. So the Flash file, SWF, is, the SWF published file, compiled, is going to be in the same directory as your Flash file. So now if I close, actually I won't close, I'll leave it open because I'm going to need it later. If I go to game, see, if I go to my CryEngine directory, game, my files, scale form, you can see button test is the Flash file, FLA, and then test button, SWF. Once you've done this, you're going to right click on your SWF file. You're going to copy. Then you're going to go into your CryEngine directory, game, libs, UI, and inside the game libs UI, you're going to see CryEngine's default GFX files. These are all their SWF files here. You may be thinking, well, it says GFX, not SWF. Well, they're the exact same file. CryEngine just renamed their extension to GFX. So in the game libs UI, we're going to right click and we're going to paste it. This is where the SWF files need to be, otherwise CryEngine won't read them. So we're going to just rename it, and we're going to get rid of this SWF, and we're going to go to GFX. And it's going to tell you that if you change the name extension, it might not be usable, but just click OK. And now it's a GFX just like every other file, and CryEngine will read your Flash file. Other important file folders to note is the UI Elements folder and the UI Actions folder. UI Elements folder hold all of the UI UI elements, all the UI definitions basically, without having a XML file inside the UI elements defining your element, which in this case your element is referred to as your GFX files. So basically GFX files are actually referred to as elements. We're going to need to add our own file here to UI elements. So I'm going to open up Notepad++ to create our document here. And this is what a UI elements XML file looks like. Let's go full screen. First of all, the beginning of the file begins with a tag UI elements name, and in this case CryEngine chose to name their group menus, and this name here, menus, is just for them. It doesn't really do anything. You can name this whatever you want, and all this does, it basically groups. It's the name of all your, in this file there's a bunch of different elements, different GFX files that are included in here, so that CryEngine knows where to find the files. And just saying that the name is menus, it basically groups all of these in a group called menus. So you're going to need that, and you can name it whatever you want. Then UI element name, HUD 2D, and the ending UI element here. This is all one element. As you can see, the name is HUD 2D. Again, this can be named whatever you want. GFX file is HUD 2D GFX. If you look inside the folders in the UI, HUD 2D GFX. So if this is confusing to you, in the UI elements folder, these files here basically register your UI or your GFX files, which is the files that come from here. Okay, those XML files register your UI so that CryEngine knows that they exist. So again, this HUD.xml, which is right here, HUD.xml in the UI elements registers all of these elements, HUD 2D, HUD 3D, that's what it does. This XML file registers those elements, those flash files, so that CryEngine knows that they exist and they can be used. So we need to create our own XML in the UI elements folder, so that we can tell it to use our flash files. If you want to take a look at my XML file for the program I showed you earlier, when I hit the button, the box flew, added an impulse. This is all I did to register mine. I put a new file, test HUD XML, which is right here, inside the UI elements folder, and for UI elements name, I just grouped it, all these elements here, in a group called Windows. Again, anything you want. And then I just registered my element. So UI element name, physics HUD, anything you want. This just names your element. This name right here is the name of the group that all these belong to. Again, you can put that any name. The UI element name here, with no S, is the name of, you want to name your actual file. So GFX file is interface test.gfx. If you look, with all the other GFX, you're going to see interface test.gfx. So right here in this UI elements tags, right here, I'm registering my my flash file so CryEngine can use it, and it knows the name of the one I want to register, which is interface test. You can put on layer 0. Basically, this is the structure you need for registering a single UI element. Registering a single Flash file so that CryEngine knows it exists and can use. This is all you need. UI element's name, the group for it, and UI elements to close the group. So from here to here, everything between those two is defining to CryEngine what it is. So at first I named my file. I give it a user-friendly name, Physics HUD, and you'll see that where this is used later on. It'll all make more sense as I get further in. I know it's confusing. I told it where to find and what to register, which is my interface GFX. And for constraints, you can see an opening and a closing for the constraints. I told it the align mode is going to be dynamic. It's going to be the vertical V-align. Vertical line is going to be center. The horizontal align is going to be center. Scale 0, max 0. For functions, I don't have any functions in my program. If you had functions in your program, then you would register them. In case you weren't wondering, if I right-click on this mouse thing I made, we're going to go into, oops, my bad, click on it, right-click, actions. If I had any functions in this file here, I would tell it that there's a function there. I would say this is the functions that are used. Basically this area right here defines every single function that is used in your Flash file. So it doesn't matter if I have a function on this button, a few functions on this button, a few functions on my actual stage. You would just take all of those combined and list every single function that was used in your program. That registers all the functions that are available with this file. Now events, and this is what we have actually in our program, event name, and then you'd be able to name it whatever you want. This doesn't matter, whatever you want. And then the fs command, and I put do physics. In our program, we have, let's say we named our event name physicalize, and our fs command would say add impulse, because that's exactly what our fs command is. We have an event, we register it, and our event was on press, if you remember correctly. Our event was on press. The reason why it's not registered as a function and it's registered as an event is because you can look at events as basically being called automatically. When something happens in the engine, it automatically calls that event. But a function is something that happens when you tell it to happen. But an event is something that happens because of something happening. And that's what happens. When a button is pressed, that would be an event. When we enter the stage with our mouse, that's an event. That means when we do something, something happens. That's an event. That's why we registered it as an event. So we have an event. We can name it whatever we want. fs command is where we register the add impulse. And description, you can put whatever you want. I just said it starts physics. This is just for you to realize what it does. And then I also have another event name, onClipEvent. And the fs command, it doesn't have an fs command, so I don't have to register one. I just put opening and closing brackets because it doesn't have an fs command. So you just leave that blank with opening and closing brackets there. Description, I just put it syncs the mouse. And parameter name is enter frame. Parameter name, enter frame. In description, when mouse enters window. What this parameter is I'll show you right now. If we go to our Flash document, this is the event that we registered, onClipEvent. As you can see, we registered the event name, onClipEvent. It doesn't have an fs command, but what are the parameters? Param name, enter frame. Anything this is the event right here, onClipEvent. Anything that's in here is a parameter. So if I had enter frame, comma, happy, comma, this is the first parameter, that's the second parameter, and that's the third parameter because they're separated by commas. So in this, I put param name, enter frame, make a description for it. Then on the next line, param name, happy, make a description for it. Then on the next line, make a param name, the, and then put a description for it. That registers the parameters. And again, a parameter is the thing that's in between this right here. We just have one, and that's enter frame, so we put that under the parameter name. I know it's really, really confusing, but I guarantee you'll get through this just okay by following what I do and listening. It'll all make sense. Oh, by the way, this information is actually tutorialized on the free sdk.crydev.net under the technical documentation. I think it's Doc 4. And it actually tells you how to do all of this. So if you don't understand it with me, go on to the free sdk.crydev.net and you'll find out how to do it on the tutorial on the CryDev site. So, and then variables. You have a variable section here. And this is, remember we had a variable called _x and then a variable called _y. So in our entire Flash program, we just list every single variable that we have. Every single one. We just list it. So we simply have two variables, _x and _y. That's all we have to press. And then, so variable name, _x, var name. I just did the exact same. I don't even know what this is, var name, honestly. This is something I cannot help you with. I don't know what this var name is. So I just copied the exact same thing that was in variable name, and it worked. So that's what I did. So if you're creating this exact program for a tutorial beginner, you can just do the exact same thing here. I'm pretty sure that in the future with more complex things, I don't think this will work 100% of the time, but for my particular program, this worked fine by just copying the same thing on a var name. And then I ended the UI element. This begins it, and then this ends it. Remember, my UI element name is physics HUD. Remember that. My UI element name is physics HUD. Just like that. So let's go ahead, and because this is my previous one, we got to create one for this program. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to New. Language, because it's an XML document, I'm going to do XML. File, and I'm going to save it. If you remember correctly, the XML files that register our Flash files are in the UI elements folder. If you don't know what UI elements folder is, it's in your current build, or CryEngine build, game, libs, UI, UI elements. And you can name this whatever you want. I'm going to name mine button _test, and I'm going to save it. I'm just going to copy everything here. If you need to, actually, you won't have this test side, so let me just go to the HUD XML, and that's in the UI elements, the HUD XML. I'm going to take everything from the HUD XML. I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste it. And this has multiple UI elements that are registered in this file. It has the HUD 2D and it has the HUD 3D. We only have one element, and that's our, what element are we registering? Let's see. What element are we registering? We're registering our test button, GFX. That's our Flash file we're registering. So we only need one. So I'm just going to get rid of everything except for yeah. Boom. There we go. There we go. Now I got rid of everything except for one UI element. See, from here to here is one UI element, and I'll just change out the settings. This is what I did for my HUD that I showed you before. I just basically substituted the stuff that already existed from the HUD XML, because that's how I found out how to do it. Usually I look at CryEngine files and see how they did it, and I just substitute my stuff. So UI element name, again, this is anything we want. Oh, first of all, let's change our group name. We're going to name this to test, BUTTONTEST, button test. This is our name of the group that everything's going to belong to, is button test. And for our element name, we'll just do button test again. Button underscore TEST. So this UI element is going to be registered under the name of button test. And that's going to belong to a group called button test. So this, our Flash file is going to be registered with the name of button test, and then our Flash file is going to belong to a group called button test. Render lockless, I don't know what this does. Leaving it to 1 seems fine. Graphics file, this is where we tell it what the name of our graphics file is. And if you remember correctly, it was test button GFX. Test underscore button GFX. Remember, capitalization is important. So test underscore BUTTON dot GFX. Test button, yeah, that's correct. Constraints, dynamic is fine. Again, you can just copy here. Dynamic is fine. Vertical line center, horizontal line center, scale 0, max 0. I just left this a default. Function, I did change because of the fact our program has no functions. I deleted the functions. I still left the functions opening tag and closing tag. That was just a pop-up telling me to enable autosave. That took too long, just leaving it there. Because we have no functions. But we do need to add events, because we do have events, if you remember. We have a on button pressed event, and we have a on entered window, on enter window event. So after the functions, we're going to make a opening and closing tag of events. Let's go to HUD. Bump, 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 to see if we can find out. See? Events. This is how they define events. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to right click and copy. Again, I'm just taking the functionality from them. Not functionality, but how they define things here. They're formatting. And I'm going to paste it. So now we have an events tag and a closing tag. Opening and closing, so we can define all our events. So event name, we can name this whatever we want. I'm going to just name it whatever I want. On button pressed. There we go. Let's see, on button 1 pressed. I can name it whatever I want. An FS command, if you remember, the FS command was ADDIMPULSE. Let's just double check. Remember, this is in quotation marks. Add impulse. Timeline, our first one. Actions. Add impulse. Capitalization is important. So add impulse, just like that. That was our FS command when the event received by us pressing a button. On button 1 press, this is whatever we want to name it. And the FS command is add impulse. In description, again, this is anything you want. It's just for you to realize what your thing does. Adds, I don't know if you can put spaces, so I just do underscores. Adds impulse to object. We also have another event, if you remember. It's when the mouse enters the screen or the stage. You remember the stage here? And if you remember, a function, we have no functions because a function, I guess, is something that you tell it to do when you want it. We don't have any of those. But we have events, which are things that happen because of something. Because we went inside of our frame, this happens. That's an event. Because we press a button, this happens. That's an event. And those are what we have. And we have 2 different events. This could be whatever you want. On entered Again, this would be whatever you want. I just like to, on entered frame. And it doesn't have any FS commands, so we'll just get rid of this and leave the two opening and closing parentheses. And for description, when mouse enters window. This is just something for me to, know. And it does have a parameter, if you remember, it's enter frame.
You like beats?
Beats, like the red ones, yeah. What's good?
Okay.
Like beats, right?
Okay, we'll put that out.
Okay.
And this second one here, if you know XML scripting, you don't need to have this. Actually, you can't have that closing deal here. That closes this event. Because it's not the end of the event, because we have to include the parameters, we can't close this event name right here. We have to actually get rid of that. On the next line, we type in param. Whoops. My bad. Just like that. Param name equals, and our parameter name, this doesn't need to be exact. This right here was just what we named we just gave a name to our event. This param name actually does need to be exactly the name of our parameter. And if you remember correctly, enter frame capitalization is important. That's our parameter because it's inside this here and here of the function. Enter frame needs to be exactly, that's our parameter. So enter capital F or A and enter frame, and DESC for a description equals oops. Yeah. Boom. I'm sorry. This event here was I'm going to write sync underscore mouse. This syncs the mouse, and then the parameter enter frame is when we actually enter the frame. It's just descriptions. I didn't really have to change that, but I like to keep my things neat and let me know, basically notes on why I'm doing things, and this description allows you to do that. And because this is the end of the parameter tag, we can push this / and then close it out. But because this is not the end of the event here, we can't put that closing. So let me push enter. And we will go like this, input / event. There we go. Because this closes the event. If I highlight this, you can see this event name, the event of on enter frame, begins here and it ends here. The parameter tag ends on this line because that's the end of our parameters. But here we go. Event starts here and then ends down here. The parameter name starts here and it ends on the same line because we don't have more than one parameter. This event here ends at the end of the line because you see this event doesn't end at the end of the line, it ends after the parameter, but this event ends at the end of the line. That's because this doesn't have any parameters, so we're done defining that. We're done with that because it doesn't have any events. But this one does have events, so we have to end it after the event parameters. Just like that. we do have variables, remember. So we're going to add in a variable tag and a variable closing tag. This is where we list all of our variables. Just to be clear, this opening function, this closing function is where we list every function that our Flash program uses in the same format of this here, same basic format here. In the events opening, events closing, we define every event that happens in our Flash program. Variables, we define every variable that is used in our Flash program. In this case, we don't have to change anything because it's the same variables as the other program. And we can actually go ahead and close it. So we've now grouped our elements with the name of button test. Then we defined our element right here, opening and closing, everything that's selected. And we gave a name to our Flash file, so CryEngine can use, which is button test. And then we defined it. So this is one UI element. So we've now gone ahead and we've registered one UI element or Flash file that CryEngine can now use because it knows about it. It knows all of its functions, it knows all of its events, it knows all of its variables, and it even has a name to refer to this thing as button 1, and it knows the group that it belongs to, button test. Pretty cool. So now we can go ahead and save, file save. If you remember correctly, it's in the UI elements folder, just like that. So let's go into CryEngine and see how this works. Oops. Let's go into CryEngine and see how this works. So open up this. It's a lot of stuff to memorize, but if you watch this, part of the tutorial, video, quite a few times, it'll totally make sense. It was really, that's why it took me so long to do it, because it was confusing to me, but I just kept trying and trying and trying, and you guys got it easier than I do, because I'm giving you a tutorial for video step by step, versus the documentation on the free SDK is just really, basically skimming. I had to basically piece it together. I don't need to go into a level at all. View, open view pane, UI emulator. That's something new to the newest version. And if we go under elements, we can see button test, because now CryEngine knows that we have a button test element. But again, an element is the actual Flash file. An element is the actual Flash file. CryEngine just calls it elements, I guess. And now that Flash file is registered because button test. It knows that we have it because we registered it. Remember, if we go back into the actual Flash file, we named our element button test. See, that's what CryEngine knows it as, is button test. UI element name. So this is our actual Flash file. See, test button GFX, and this is what CryEngine knows it by, is button test, the element name, button test, button test. So now it knows exactly where it is. Had I not made this document, it wouldn't even know that it exists. So that's what this XML document in the UI elements folder does. And this window here allows you to preview, visually, your actual document. So let's, after we, double click on button test, well, just click once on button test, and scroll down here. These are the properties. Visible. Yes, we want it to be visible. As you can see, and here you can see that it's visible. You can see your button. This is in CryEngine. Pretty cool. This is the basic starts of getting your thing into CryEngine. We have CryEngine reading your graphics file, just like this. You can see the black background is black. You can see that the buttons are gray. The text is white, just like in the actual file. What you don't see is you don't see your custom mouse. You don't see when you hover over it turns red, and this is because by default CryEngine does not accept anything to do with mouse and keyboard inputs. It doesn't even worry about that. But under the properties, remember, button test, clicked on it once, we put visible on. You see invisible, visible. If we scroll down, align mode, dynamic. See? That's what we chose inside the, this file. Align mode, dynamic. If you didn't have this inside your file, you can just, once you're in CryEngine, you can just set it to here. It's like if you did my vehicle tutorial, you remember we set a whole bunch of files in the XML for the vehicle script, but in CryEngine they had a vehicle editor and you can just create those through the visual editor. Same thing applies to here. You could actually just create that file and then without all those extra properties that we actually wrote down, and you can just, once you actually registered it, you can actually set those properties here. Like this is dynamic, horizontal align center, vertical align center, so you can change these in here. And see, vertical align center, horizontal align center. So something you don't actually need, constraints in here. You don't even need them. You can actually just put it in here. And if we do want scale, this means depending on how big the viewport is. Like let's see this button. See this button here? How big it is? Let's go into the Flash file and go into 100%. See how big that button is? Just like that. And it's a big screen, but the button's that big. If you go on the CryEngine, the button's still just as big as that, but the screen's a lot smaller. By hitting scale, it basically scales all the things in your document based on its based on how big the thing is, how big the window is. So if your window is full screen, it would basically take this element here, or an element, but the symbol here, and scale it so that it's always proportionate. Now you can see my actual mouse here. It's not moving, and there's a reason for that. I'll explain that. It's not moving, but you can actually see everything now because you clicked on the scale. So no matter what the window size is, it will automatically scale everything to be the right size no matter how big it is. So if I go ahead and I just make this, it's whatever. You can choose a resolution. Like right now, I can view it at 800 by 600. I can view it at 1920 by 1080. And see how I made the window bigger? That's what scaling does. Now the button is bigger, and now this is bigger because I chose to scale. Now if I took off scale, because we had the document actually in Flash as 1920 by 1080, and that's we have it here, scaling doesn't matter. But as soon as we take off scaling and we lower the size, lower or bigger than we actually defined in Flash, so let's say 720, our objects actually stay the same size. That's why scaling needs to be enabled. It just makes sure everything is viewable at all times, no matter what size the window is. Here we go. This is why the mouse isn't following and the button isn't turning. Under the flags, you want to enable mouse events. This makes sure that CryEngine knows about mouse functions and events. Click that to true. Key events. This if you have any functions in your Flash file or events in your Flash file that uses key inputs like pressing a key on the keyboard, CryEngine will recognize those. Same thing with mouse. If you have anything to do with mouse events, which in your Flash file, which we do, when we move the mouse, we want the little cursor we made to follow the mouse. That's a mouse event because it has to do with the mouse. So we have to enable that. And you can just enable console mouse, this console mouse cursor, controller input. This allows you to have like a 360 controller, a PS3 controller. You can actually control that mouse through this analog stick. You don't want events exclusive checked. I don't even know what that does, but having it unchecked worked for me. And render lockless, this could be on or off, and honestly, it didn't make any difference. And force no unload, keep that off. So render lockless on, controller input on, console mouse cursor, console mouse, key events, mouse events, all on. Hardware cursor I have off. Now if I go over my document, you can see it is moving. We told CryEngine to, yes, pay attention to those mouse and keyboard events. Don't ignore them, because by default it does. And if I hover over, it turns red. Now again, if I click, see, I'm clicking. Actually in-game, like I said, that small little mouse will actually go away. That mouse won't be there, that little mouse won't be there, so you'll just see this red mouse that you have. And It's actually a property you have to set to turn off that actual regular mouse, and I'll show you how to do that in flowgraph. Yeah, all the functionality for the button, by the way, making the box move and push with physics and having the thing pop up, that's all flowgraph. There's no C++ code necessary. I know, good news, right? Because I don't even know how to program in C++. And flowgraph's just super easy. So I'm glad that you can do a lot with the UIs. Actually, I think you could do a whole UI scheme, like a RTS type of deal with that's what I plan on doing with it, making a RTS type of theme where you got little buttons you can add people and stuff like that. That's what I plan on doing, and I think flowgraph has the power to do that with the UI system. It's just amazing. But again, if you click on the button, nothing happens because we haven't told the engine what to do when it sends that, because I'm clicking it and it is sending that FS command to CryEngine, but CryEngine doesn't know what to do with that FS command, and that's what we are going to tell it through flowgraph. So actually we can get right into the flowgraph work, and there are a couple of XML files that need to be created and actually for this to work, and flowgraph, those files can be created through flowgraph, and they actually have to be created through flowgraph. So there we go. We got our element into it. Now to make that button do something, because it is sending that command every time we click it, that FS command, but we need to tell CryEngine and flowgraph what to do with it. And all these properties here, they do not matter. As in these properties don't stick with your program. They do not stick. This is just for emulation purposes. Anything you set in these files here, anything you set here, they do not. I repeat, they do not set permanent properties. They just are effective for your emulation, not for using in the game or anything like that. These are just properties that are set for the emulation. To actually set the properties to use for games, you do that through flowgraph, and I'll show you how to do that. And again, we have on the Elements tab our button test. We can also view all the functions, because if you remember correctly, in our XML file, we had no functions, so we don't have any functions. Let's close that. Events, if you remember, we have on button 1 pressed and on entered frame. Those are events that we have. Variables, remember we have _x, _y. Just like that. Pretty cool. We don't have any arrays, and we don't have any movie clips. We just have events. Pretty cool, I think. So let's close out of this, because again, those settings don't work for the game. They just work for the emulation window. We need to set those properties in the actual flowgraph. So I'm going to go to Open, and I'm going to open up a test level. And I'm going to not save any changes because I wasn't even in a level, so I don't need to save it. I'm trying the best I can, guys, on this. I know it may have sounded confusing, but I am trying my best from what I know from my knowledge. I did get it working, didn't I? So must be doing something right. Hurry up and load. Okay, now there's the deal. In order to use your UI files, you saw we had to register. UI files, I'm referring to your actual Flash document, your Flash file. So in order to use UI files, you saw we had to register it with the system with those XML files in the UI elements folder. That's how we register it so the CryEngine can use it. On top of that, in order for us to use it through flowgraph or C++, actually, in order to use it through flowgraph, we actually need to add a little bit more of files for a flowgraph to even be able to use it. And this is what we have to do. Open up flowgraph. And this is very important here. You're going to go, once you're in flowgraph, you go to File, New UI Action. Just like that. And there's a specific place you need to save this UI action. It's in the current, your CryEngine build, Games, Libs, UI, and remember I told you that there's important folders you need to know, which is the UI elements and UI actions. This is why. UI elements is the file XML. It's a folder that holds all the XML files that register your Flash files, and UI actions is what holds your UI action files from flowgraph. And we're going to create one, and we're going to call it BUTT. Name it whatever you want. Test BUTT button 1. Test button 1. Hide. Name it whatever you want, but I want this action to hide our file, from the screen, because we want to be able to show our UI on the actual screen when we're playing our game. We also want to be able to hide it. So this UI action, and UI actions are actions. It's our actions that control your UI, like showing your UI, hiding your UI, starting, running your UI, stuff like that. That's what UI actions are. Without these, you won't be able to use them in your flow graph. So I'm going to create a UI action that holds, hides my UI. And I'm also going to create another UI action that shows my UI. So test button 1 hide. Copy it. And I'm going to save it in that folder. Very, very important. I'm going to go to File, New UI Action, and in the same UI Action folder, I'm going to create one that says Show, so that this UI action is going to show. And again, you can name it whatever you want. It's just intuitive to name it something that makes sense. Now, if you look on the flow graphs, usually you have your, entities, and I have like my start stuff here. But this is UI actions. Because you saved in UI actions folder, it needs to be. This is where your UI actions are. If I open that and scroll down, you're going to see test button 1 hide, test button 1 show. See that? These are UI actions. And now we need to define what these actions do. This is what these actions do. The first one we want to do is we want to just do the show one. So make sure the test button 1 show action is, and we're going to define what this action does. Add node, UI, action, start. You always need this. This is defining what this UI action does, and it needs a start, and then it also needs a end. So make a start, and now we're going to set the properties. Add node, UI, display, config, right click, add node, UI, display, constraints, config constraints. Remember those properties I said that are only work for the emulation? Well, these two ones, the UI display config and the UI display constraints, is what sets it for the actual game. And for the element, what element do we want to set the config for? Well, double click here, open this up, and you're going to see button test. See, we're able to select the button test. We want to be able to, all these properties apply to a button test. And for the constraint, same thing. For the element, we want all these properties here to apply to the button test. So, start action, we want to set properties. We don't want to get the properties, we want to set the properties. Cursor. Remember I told you that white cursor will still show in game no matter what? Well, by having cursor of 0 means it won't show the actual Windows cursor. It'll just hide it, because we already have a cursor. We made that red little cursor, so we don't need the actual Windows cursor. So make sure cursor 0. Mouse events, remember we do want to have mouse events, otherwise we won't be able to move the mouse and click on the buttons. Key events, yes we do. Console mouse, yes we do. Console cursor, absolutely. Controller input, yep. We don't want event exclusive. Fixed projection depth, we don't want that. Force no unload, we don't want that. Alpha 0, layer 0, everything's fine. After we're done setting these properties, on set, after we're done setting these, so when it's set, on set, when it's done setting the properties, we want to set another thing of properties. And we want it to be full screen. Again, This type, see, dynamic is what we had before. We'll just have it full screen because we want the UI element to be a full screen application. Top left and top, this is where the thing starts. You can leave that to 0 if you're going to have full screen. Width 0, height 0, because we have it full screen. Doesn't really matter. These parameters don't matter if it's full screen. Scale, we just leave that at 0. Actually, yes, we want that to 1. That scales it. Remember I was telling you about that scale property? Height align, middle. Vertical align, middle. That's what you want. Maximize? No, we don't want maximize. Just like that. And then after it's done setting all those properties, we want it to show our UI on the screen. That's why we named it test button show, our UI action. So add node, UI, display, display. What element do we want to display? Well, we already know that. We want to display our button test file on the screen. And when we set the last property, we want to show it. Just like that. We want to show it. Now we need to end. Add node, UI, actions, end. Just like that. So when it shows the UI, go ahead and end. Very, very important. You want disable actions on the end to be true. And for the start, you want disable action to be true as well. This is so that when you load your level, this event, everything here, doesn't run automatically. This means that this event here, showing this HUD, showing this UI on the screen, will only happen when you tell it to specifically start this process here. Because you don't want it to start automatically. You only want it to start when you actually tell it to. And that's why we have disable action by default here. And we want to disable the action there. So this is what this UI action does. This is what test button 1 does. Is it first starts the process and it sets these properties on our button test element. And then after it's done setting that, it sets some more properties to the button test UI element. Again, remember element means it's just your UI file. Flash file, and sets properties. After it's done setting those, it goes ahead and it displays your element, and then it just ends the action. There we go. Now for the test HUD hide, we'll do the same thing. Every UI action, because that's what these are, because we had a UI action, has to have a start and an end to let it know where to start and where to end. So that's going to happen here. Add node, UI, because we're on the hide now. We want to make an action that hides it. So UI, action, start. We'll just create the end right away here as well. UI, action, end. We want these to be disabled. Yes. You want this to be disabled. Yes. Add node, UI, display, config, UI, display, constraints. Remember, config comes first, then constraints. You can do whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, but I just do config first, then constraints. You can actually, set these properties first before this, but that's just the way I do it. Add node, UI, display, and display, because on this one we want to hide it. So we just tell it to hide instead of show. Let's just connect these here. When you start, we want to set properties of what? We want to set the properties, again, of our button test. Same thing here. We want to set the properties of our button test element or flash file. And we want to display what? Button test. But we don't want to display it. We want to hide it. You know what I'm saying? So here we go. When this action is started, when this UI action, test button 1 hide, is started, we want to do this. And after we're done, we want to end this action. Remember, no cursor? Mouse events, yes. Key events, yes. Console mouse, yes. Console cursor, yes. Controller input, yes. And then everything default. So after we set this, we want to set some more properties. Full screen is proper, yep. and scale. We do. Just like that. And after we set that, we want to hide. And then after we hide it, and action. The on hide. You want it on hide and action. On hide and action. Just like that. Let me go to mine here. Oops. Okay. So there we go. Now we defined actions. When we start an action, we want to do this, and then we want to end it for the hide. And for the show, when we start the action, we want to do all this, and then we want to end it. Seems pretty clear, pretty straightforward. That's perfect. Now we have to write a flow graph, just like a normal flow graph. Not in the UI entities, UI actions. We just want to write a regular flow graph because we already have what this action does, and this one hides it. So this one shows it, and then this one hides it. So now in our flow graph, we have to call these functions, or we have to call these actions. That's why we did disable action to 0, because we don't want it starting automatically. We want to be able to call this function, or this action to start it. And that's what we do in our flow graph. In our flow graph, we'll actually say, yes, start this action, and then it will do all this. And then if we want to hide it, or show it, we'll say, yes, call this action, and then it'll do everything here. So now we defined actions. It is important, every time you change something in the UI action files, you have to save. So make sure you click on it. This is a show one here. File, save. Test button 1. We're going to save this one as well. And then I just went ahead and I made a spawn point. Let me just put this down here. See, I made a spawn point. And then I right-clicked and I added a flow graph to the spawn point. Again, this is just regular flow graphing. After we define the actions, we just regular flow graphed. And we want to disable. I'm just disabling my other stuff because we're not going to be using that. We're going to be using the ones we. God damn it! A little shit. Hold on. Are you kidding me? There. Just disabling everything so that we can start fresh. So I made an actual flow graph. Just a regular standard like you would do anything else by assigning a flow graph to an entity, which in this case I assigned it to my spawn point. So here we go. We have a start. We added a start, so when we start the game, we want to do something. Okay. I wanted to run my, well, first of all, yeah, when I created mine, remember I clicked the M key and it turned off the graph and then it turned it on, not the graph, the UI. Remember I put M and it turned it on, I push M again, then it turned it off. We're going to do the same thing here, because we're going to do exactly the same thing that I showed you how to do. So, that's why we made two. We made a test button hide and a test button show, because we want to switch between the two when we press M. We want to switch between these actions when we press M. So, here is what we have. We're going to create a right-click, add node, input, key. And the key is going to be M. Key M. So when we press M, we press the M key. We want to do something. Well, obviously we want to show our graph. Our UI. We want to show our UI when we press M. So we have to call the UI action, which is the show. when we press M, we want to call the UI action show because obviously this UI action, as you can see, shows the UI. And how do you call a UI action from your flow graph? That's pretty simple. Right click, add node, UI, action, control. This is how you call the action. This is how you call the action. So when we press this, we want to start. But what action do we want to start? And this UI action tells us which one. Obviously, we want to test button 1 show. We want to show. We want to, when we press the M key, we want to start the action. Well, what action do we want to start? We want to start our show action right here. There we go. When we press it, we want to show it. Now sometimes CryEngine needs to be saved up, save everything. Again, remember, these files need to be saved. Not these flow graph ones, but the UI action ones, they need to be saved every time something is changed. So make sure you just save your flow graphs file, save. So let me just close out of here. Right click, click G. Now, sometimes you need to close CryEngine and restart for these things to take effect. Unlike regular flow graphs, they take effect right away. With the UI actions, I've noticed already that you need to restart the editor. But let me just click M because we want to see what happens. Oh wow, look at that. That's crazy. I pushed M and a button showed up. And look at that. Beautiful. And we've successfully done this. But if I press M again, it doesn't hide it. Why? Because we didn't tell it that the second time we press M, we want to call the hide UI action. We just told it that when we press M once, we want to call the show UI action. And when we press it again, we didn't tell it to call the hide UI action. So we do that. If I click the button, nothing happens because we still haven't told it what to do. We still haven't told it what to do with the on the button pressed. We'll get to that. And you may be asking, wasn't our document or flash file black and there was a button in the middle? Yes. This reason why it's full screen is it's the full screen from here to here, up here, to all the way down to here, all the way down. I'm looking at the mouse now, down to here. That's full screen, and this button was in the middle of the full screen, remember? But it's not black at all. Everything's clear except for the button. I haven't tested this, but I believe it's because of the alpha. We had alpha of 0, meaning all the stage was hidden because it had a 0 alpha. It wasn't opaque. Let's go to the flow graph on UI actions, and let's go to our show UI action test button show, and you can see here when we set the properties for the display, alpha was 0. Let's go ahead and set this to 1. File, save, because we need to save it every single time. And even though you do save it every single time, oh wait, whoops, that was the hide one. Put it back to 0 because that was on the hide one. Let's go ahead and save file, save. Let's go to the button show, and we show the UI. Let's put the alpha to 1. And I don't know if this is going to work, but that's why I believe it's clear and not black like the actual document. File, save. Whoops. Nope. I don't know why. I believe it's because the actual stage, is always going to be invisible. In the stage, I don't know why, but see this right here? Remember I told you this is called the stage? This is going to be invisible. Everything that's in the stage is going to be invisible. That's why you saw this. And we really want that. We don't want the whole screen to be black because we wouldn't be able to see anything. So the stage is going to be invisible. Just go in with that aspect. Everything that's in the stage is going to be invisible in CryEngine, which is pretty much what we want. We don't want the whole screen to be black. So let me just go to flowgraph, UI actions, and let's go to our show and just turn this alpha to 0. Just like that. And file, save. Again, that button showed even though we didn't press M, and like I said, sometimes you do need to restart the editor. That's what I'm saying. When you actually play the game in pure game mode, I don't think it'll do that, honestly. But let me just restart the editor. But that has happened before, where it shows it after I've already, went into game mode and did it. When I went back into game mode, it like kept those settings for some reason that it was shown, but it shouldn't do that. I think in actual game mode, it doesn't do that. But after you've done this tutorial and gotten your own UI in there, you're going to be so happy. So I'm just glad I can do this tutorial for you guys. I think it's something you guys will really, really like a lot. And just take my information and expand onto it, to get better and better and better. Let me just try to jump in game. See, you can see now that the UI doesn't show. But if I press M, it does show. And if I escape and go back into game, it shows again. See what I'm saying? That's just an editor bug. I think if pure game mode, I'm pretty sure in pure game mode it doesn't do that. It's an editor bug. It just didn't reset the settings. But that's all. Now we have to call the hide function. We press M again. Let's go back into flowgraph. Entities. Start our spawn point. So as you can see, when we press the M key, we wanted to start the UI action of show. And you saw what that did. The show action was in charge of setting the properties and then showing it. So now we have to call the hide to hide it when we press M again. And I don't know, I don't think they have a toggle like if you press M, like a toggle function that a flow node, when you press M and then you press it a second time, it toggles between on and off. They don't have that. But I did find something called a sequentializer, which does basically that, or you can use it as that. So add node logic sequentializer. And what this does, if you read here, hover over, it says on each in trigger, triggers one of the selected connected outputs in sequential order. Meaning when this receives the in the first time, it outputs this one. When it receives it the second time, it outputs this one. And then it goes back to the beginning again. 1, 2. So basically I'm using these as a on, off, on, off. So when we press it the first time, we obviously want to call the start function. But when we press it again, it's going to output to this too, because it outputs in sequential order. It does the 1, then when the in trigger is received, it outputs 2, in trigger receive, outputs 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6. But if there's no 3, 4, 5, or 6 outputs, outputting, it just goes back to the beginning again. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's how I do it. So we're going to add another one of these action controls. Control C, Control V. And we want to change what action is called when we press it the second time. And we want to call the hide action. And start. So this is how it's going to work. This is how the sequentializer works. Just to sum it all up. As long as you can see that this is outputting here, and this is outputting here. But this isn't outputting, this isn't outputting, this isn't outputting, this isn't outputting. That means these will never be outputted. It'll just keep switching between 1 and 2, because the first time it receives an import, because when we pressed it, it receives the import, it outputs to this one, which shows it. The second time we press it, it's automatically going to go to the second one, and which is going to turn it off again. Then when we press it again, it's going to go back to 1, because we don't have these set. So it's just going to keep going 1 and 2, 1 and 2. That's how we have that toggle feature of M. So let me just close this out here. And every time we press N, it's going to toggle between the on and off. So M, 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 M. And if you see, while I'm moving the mouse on the screen's turning, and I didn't really want that at all. See if I hover over it. There we go. I can move around, obviously, but I didn't want that. That's why I added a stationary camera, so that my position wouldn't move. My camera wouldn't move as I move the mouse. You know what I'm saying? So let's do that. So what I did was added a camera. Miscellaneous. Camera. Added it there. Once I added the camera, I moved it up and then rotated it down. As you can see, I rotated it down a couple of degrees. That's all I did. Then I went into flowgraph after I added that camera entity. And when we start, obviously when we start, we want to enable a new camera view. Add node, camera, view, just like that. You select your camera entity, right click, add selected entity. So now the camera that you placed is the entity that's used by camera view. Then I just started that view. When I start the game, I want to enable. That's what I did here. So when I start the game, I want to enable this view, the camera view. So let me just go back into game and enabled that view. So now my camera view is just this, and my screen doesn't turn. So I'm just like this, and I can hover over that. If I want to hide it, which typically it's supposed to be off by default, but again, that was an editor glitch that once you already use it once, it just doesn't, it saves the settings. But there you go, just like that. Perfect. If I click it again, the button doesn't do anything. So let's take care of that. And this is simple, easy. That's why I love flowgraph. This is very, very simple. All right. Let's go to flowgraph and add functionality. And remember, we had an event that when the button is pressed, it does an FS command. So we have to tell it to do something when we receive that event. Remember I told you as well that that add impulse, we added that in there and named it whatever we want, that parameter, that add impulse. To the FS command, that's never used really. It just complains if it doesn't have it. We're actually not going to use that, refer to the add impulse anywhere, besides in the script when we created that parameters. So let's go to our flowgraph again. And here we go. In order to do the event, so let me just take everything here. I'm going to bring all this stuff down to separate between my flowgraph and the one we're creating now. So when we start the game, we first set the camera to a specific view, and then when we press M key, it's going to show our flash file, our UI, and we press it again, it's going to hide it. So now, but we have to have functionality to what happens when we press the button, and that's easy. Right click, add node, UI, events. Remember, because our thing was an event, and because we registered it as an event in the XML file, you're going to see button test is a new menu, and then on button 1 pressed. See, on button 1 pressed. Now it's a new node, on button 1 pressed, meaning when it happens, see, when the event happens, do, then your own custom functionality. These don't need to be worried about, just leave them blank. Just what happens when you press the button, it's going to call this. There we go. Because when you press that button, the Flash file sent that event on button pressed. And when that happens, what do you want to do? Well, we want to display something to the screen, so add node, HUD, display debug message. So when we press the button, see on button 1 pressed, on event, we want to show a debug message. And what is the message we want? Well, the message we want is button 1 pressed. And we only want to show it for, like, let's say 2 seconds. Display time. Just show it for 2 seconds, then get rid of it. Font size, we'll have it bigger, like a 4. There we go. Just like that. So let's test it. Let's go ahead, Control G to jump in game. Get rid of that first, because this is how it normally would be. Press M, and see button 1. Let's click it. Look up in the left-hand corner. When we click it, oh wow, button 1 pressed. Then it goes away after 2 seconds. Press it again. Keep pressing again. Press again. Press again. There we go. Now our button actually does something. Because our button, when we pressed it, sent an event to CryEngine called on button pressed. We told it, okay, on button pressed, let's do this. And that's what this flowgraph node does. Right here. Event. When our button is pressed, see, event, button test, on button pressed, go ahead and do this. This is what we wanted to do. And for the physics, that's simple as well. All I did was I right click, because we want to add an impulse to the object. Right click, physics, action impulse. And what entity do we want to receive the impulse? That's what this choose entity is. Well, we want this right here to receive the impulse. So once we select it, right click on choose entity, assign selected. Now we got to tell it what direction. Impulse, this is the direction, X, Y, and Z, what direction. And this is to add spin to it and where the impulse is applied on the object. 0, 0, 0 means it's applied in the middle of the object, which you can just leave everything default, but you want to worry about the impulse. We're going to right click, add node, vector 3, scale vector 3. For scale, we're going to add in 1000. This is how powerful, when we use a scale vector, this is how powerful the impulse is going to be. And the vector, this is a direction. We want it to be in the Y direction. I just chose Y because, that's, whoops, put a 1. 0 and 1. 0 means not in that direction, 1 means yes in that direction. So we want yes in the Y. Not no, 0 for no in the Z, 0 for no in the X. We want 1 for yes in the Y. And we want it to be 1000 powerful. And we just input this in the impulse. Just like that. And but when do we want to apply impulse? Well, when we have our button pressed. So when we press our button, we want to do the impulse in the Y direction with the power of 1000. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and exit. Control G. Let's go ahead and hide it because it's supposed to be hid in the beginning. Okay. Now if I press it, there we go. Let me press it again. And I can just keep pressing it without even waiting, and it's just going to keep on adding it. But that is amazing. Let's go back in. Tools. Let me try something. I want to see if I can get rid of this showing up when it's not supposed to. Because when you first do it, it doesn't show up. But after you've already done it once, it shows up apparently. I don't know if I can, but let's just see if I can get rid of that because we really don't want that In the real game mode, like launcher, it won't do that. But in the real game, it won't do that. But just for editor, just to get it perfect. Let's see. I don't know. But let's go to the UI actions. Let's go to our show. And whenever we show it, we want to reload the flash file. So on set, reload, and let's just also initialize it. And go ahead and file, save. So when we show it, we want to initialize it, reload it, and I don't know if it's going to work, but hey, let's try. And make sure we save. And on the hide, we want to hide it. We want to unload and reload, I guess. I don't know. I'm just playing around with this. Just reload our scripts. Let me just jump back in game. Okay, yeah, I figured out that didn't work, but I did figure out why it's doing it, and I'll show you. And that's what I kind of suspected. But let's get rid of this. Remove, and we'll save. I'm just putting it back at default. Remove, file. Now, check this out. What it's doing, I just saw, is that it's just remembering what it was last. If I push Control G, it doesn't show up. I push M, it shows up. M, it gets rid of. M, it shows up. That's how we wanted it, if you remember correctly. But let me exit it while this button is on. See, I just exited while the button was on. Now if I go back in game, it'll show up, because that's the last state it was in. See that? Let me exit while it's on again and jump back into game. It's on again. But let me turn it off and then exit. Now if I go back in, it's going to be off, because it just remembers the last state. That's all it's doing, and that just confirms it will not happen in the actual game environment. But jump back in, press M to get it in, and this just pretty cool. Pretty cool. That's, I think so. Let's expand on this functionality. This looks pretty cool. Let me just expand on the functionality. I haven't done this yet. Again, this is just me on the fly in the moment, adding more functionality, so I could take a little bit. But I want to actually be able to click on an object and then add the impulse to that certain object. Like right now, it's set to define to always when I push the button to do this. But I want to be able to select my object first, and then select a different object that I want to add impulse, just so it can be dynamic. So let's go to flowgraph and entities, start, spawn point. Let's go ahead and right click, add node, input, mouse. And when we start the game, we want to enable mouse support for CryEngine. We want to disable the movement, and we want to enable modal mode. This will actually show the mouse on the screen. This will show the mouse on the screen. Actually, no. Let's get rid of modal mode. We don't need that. Let's get rid of modal mode. Actually, no. Let's turn it back on at first. Update always. Yes. Race selection all. Modal mode key. Number 0. Every hit. Yes. And just like that. And what we want to do is we want to, because currently when we press the button, it's adding the impulse to this entity, which is that box. But we want to change this entity to whatever we click on. So let's go ahead and do that. So we want this entity of we're applying the impulse when we press the button to this entity, that box that we saw. But we want to change this depending on what we click with our mouse, which is entity ID. Say entity ID, if you hover over it, entity ID of the current entity under the mouse cursor. And this takes the entity ID. So we want to get the entity ID that's under the mouse, and when we click it, when we press, we want to send that over to this entity. So here we go. On press. This is when we click on something, something happens. Well, currently, if you just have the on pressed event of the actual mouse, it'll just take any, when you right click, it'll output this. If you middle click with the scroll wheel, we click it, it'll output it. If we left click, it'll output it. We just wanted to only output this when we left click and not right click or that click. And I know this from just experience. When you left click, this outputs with the value of 1. When you right click, it outputs with the value of 2. And if you middle click, it outputs with the value of 3. So when we press this, we want to check if it's 1. If it is 1, then go ahead and continue with the operation. If it's not 1, which is left click, then don't go with it. So we're going to go to add node, math, equal. We want to check. When we press it, if it's 1, it'll send out a 1 signal. So we got to check if it's equal to 1. So is this number it sends out, which is left click, is 1. So left click is 1. Then we send it out and it's going to check. Is it equal to 1, which is left clicking? If it's true, then go ahead with the operation. That's how we control difference between left click, right click, and middle click. We only want to select object click. Entity ID. Right click, math, set number. We want to set the number. Entity ID is going to go into the in port. So the entity ID, see entity of the current entity under the mouse cursor. We're going to send that value into here. But we only want to commit that value when we click. So if our button we press is 1, which is a left one, go ahead and set this value. Meaning, as you move your mouse around, it's going to keep outputting the value to this here, the ID of whatever your mouse is under, to here. But it's never going to actually stick. It's going to keep changing. It's never actually going to stick because it's not setting it, not confirming that, yes, that's the number I want. But if we're hovering over the entity ID and it sends out, let's say, entity ID of 10, and we click while we're hovering over it, it's going to go ahead and check if it's 1, left clicking, and it's going to set it, meaning it's going to keep permanent that number, whatever's under the mouse. So it's a way of selecting that entity and keeping it in memory, keeping that memory we clicked on in memory. And because the input nodes, like see choose entity here, we have a choose entity here, and choose entity here, these are integers. They only accept integers or any. They accept an any slot, any output, which is the green, or red output, which is integer. Because this set number saves it as a float, which is this gray thing here, we need to convert it back to a integer before we send it to this up here. So right click. There's no thing to do that except for a little workaround, which I'm going to show you. Add node, math, round. And I found that it just rounds a float to a 1. So if this entity is 13 and we round 13, it's still going to be 13, but now instead of a float, it's going to be an integer, which is good. So let's just send that integer up into that. So here's what's going to happen. When we hover our mouse over an entity, let's say a different box, it's going to send that over here. And it's going to keep on changing. But when we press, if we press the left click, because it's checking if it's 1, which is left clicking, if we are hovering over something and we left click, it's going to set that value, meaning it's going to keep it. So because this will just keep outputting. So if I have my mouse here, anywhere over here, it's going to keep on changing what value is sent to here, because it's only getting what's under the mouse cursor at that time. But we want to keep the number that's under the mouse cursor when we press. That's why we're setting this value permanently. Setting. See, when we left click is 1, we're going to set it and keep that number. So it's going to keep that number that we're hovering over and clicking in memory. So it's going to know that ID. And we're going to send whatever we click to the entity. So in a way, you're controlling what object you are adding an impulse to based on what you're clicking on. So if I click on, so if I hover over this, it's sending, like, let's say this is entity ID of 1, entity ID of 2, entity ID of 3. So if I'm going like this, I'm hovering over it, it's 1, this is 2, it's 3, it's going to send it. But as soon as I click, it's going to set it to 1. That means if I hover over this, it's still only going to be 1 in the memory. If I hover over this, it's still only going to be 1 because it only sets that number when I click. So if I click on this, it's going to set it to 2 now because this is entity ID of 2. No matter what I hover over, it's not going to set that value in stone because we only told it to set that number in stone when we click. And then it's going to send it to the impulse node. So after I click it, it has that entity ID in the impulse node. So when I click on the button, it's going to add impulse to that entity. So that's how that works. Again, I didn't do this beforehand, but I'm pretty good with flowgraph. So jump right in game. You got 2 mouses. One is, the gray one is because we enabled modal mode with that mouse input node. So let me just hide it and bring it back in. Let's go ahead and we're going to select this box here, and we're going to push the button and add impulse. Let's go ahead and select this one here and then add an impulse. Let's go ahead and select this one here by left clicking and add an impulse. And if we keep adding, see, bada bing, bada boom, bada bing, bada boom, bada bing, bada boom. Just like that. Pretty ingenious, huh? Pretty cool. Okay, there's an issue which if you want to do exactly what I'm doing, you're gonna run into. If I jump in game and I click on this object and I left click, if I try to left click again, it's not going to move the entity. That's because it no longer has this entity ID when I click this button. Why? Because behind this button is the terrain, and the terrain has an entity ID of 0. So it's not going to move this because now the action impulse is actually have an entity ID of 0. Because when I left click, I'm clicking on the button, but I'm also assigning the terrain that's behind it to the impulse, which is a 0. So it no longer has it. So I have to re-click and click. Now I have to re-click it again to keep moving it. Because once I click on the button, yes, it moves it, but it now has a different ID of 0, which nothing has 0 except for the terrain. So let's fix that. And that's pretty damn easy to fix, I believe. So let's go to start, spawn point. And when it outputs the entity ID, we're only wanted to output when it's not 0. That's just how we do that. So add node, well, let's just copy this. The equal. Entity ID is there. Is this outputting equal to 0? If it's true, if it's false, go ahead and give it the number. That's all you have to do. If it's just checking if it's 0. If it is 0, it doesn't output anything because it would be true. But if it's not 0, it outputs. So it's only going to output the entity of something that's not 0. So it avoids us clicking on the terrain. Let's go to here and jump back in game. And if I click here and oops. That doesn't work. Let's try something else. Math. It's got to work with this. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. So, here. Add node. I gotta see. Let's see. Math. Where are you? Math. Less than. Where's okay, less than. If A is less than 1, which would be 0, the only way it would be less than 1 if it's 0. If A is less than 1, output. If it's not less than 1, do that. You've got to be kidding me. Let's do equal. And let's just add this here right before it sends it to the entity. If it's equal to 0, if it's true, output. If it's not true, we 1. If it's not 0, if these are not, if whatever this ID is not equal to 0, we want to send it. And see, this is what I was talking about. An entity port can only be connected from an entity or an int port. So we need to add another math round. Control C, Control V. False, just like that. And now the red is it's an int, and we can add that just like that. Ah, it's so weird. Oh, I guess I can't do that. Okay, well, we're all done. I mean, that's everything. I'm just trying to teach you guys just a little bit more. The actual tutorial is all done. But let me just enable this here. And add node. Math. path. Let's see. Okay. Well, I ended up fixing it anyways. It was just a small error here. It was losing the value of the. It was losing the value of my entity ID along that little chain I had going. So let me just jump back in game. If you can see here, let me just get rid of that. Okay, let me see here. I'm going to go to M, and I'm going to left click on this, and I'm going to click. Oops. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. It was just doing it. What? You guys just saw that it was doing it, huh? I'm just debugging right now. Bum, bum, bum. Not what I want to do, not what I want to do. Yeah, there's no reason why it shouldn't work. It says through flowgraph it's working 100%. Oh, it's all good. Well, again, this is just the beginning. Changes the add impulse dynamically. We had the entity ID, and we save the entity ID that's under the mouse when we click, and then it just sends it to the add impulse. So if I go into here, click on this, okay, now our thing isn't working at all. That's a little upsetting. Alright, but this tutorial is just about done. I just want to check, I just really want to get that working. You guys can, if you guys know how to do it, you know, that's fine on the add impulse thing. Like I said, I hadn't done that before, so it was just something at the top of my head. Come on, start up. Come on, start up, start up. Jeffrey's up from his nap.
Yeah.
That's good.
I woke him up.
That's good. All right, hurry up.
You know he doesn't have school tomorrow.
Yeah, I know they got vacation for a week.
I don't. Well, it's my sister's keeper tomorrow.
everything's saying it should work. It's very, very self-explanatory. It sends out the entity ID. It sets it. I'm going to press left click. Then it rounds it. Just like that. Even debugging, you'll see here. If I click on this. Oh, what the fuck? Can you believe this? Everything's working. Now if I keep clicking again, it's 0 in the background. If I click, as I'm clicking, it's also changing it to 0. So I'd have to re-click, click, re-click, click, re-click, click. And that's weird. You just saw it wasn't working. I didn't change anything. Then it was working. It's a flowgraph thing right here. The flowgraph's just messing up on me. See? ID of 0. And it sent it to that. That's why I didn't move it. But we wanted to stop it from sending 0 to this. We only wanted to send actual valid IDs. And that's what I did here. With node math equals, we check if the value right here, we check if it's equal to 0. And if it's not 0, math set number. If it's not 0, we want to set the number to whatever the ID was. And if it sends out a 0 to this, it won't set that 0 anyways. Because it's only saving that number and sending it out when this is set. And we're not setting it if it's 0. So this will get 0 sometimes, but it won't actually send it out because it's not setting it unless it's not 0. Add node, math, round. And the logic behind this is crazy. I mean not crazy, but it's pretty stable. And it's just choosing when it wants to work and when it doesn't want to work. It's pretty ridiculous. Look it, it's working now. If I keep on pressing it, you can see adding impulse. Let me select another object. Press, 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 press. So that's exactly what we wanted. It's working flawlessly now. I don't know why it had an issue. So there we go. Let me select this guy. Bam. Click it again. Bam. Click it again. Let's just select something else. Click it again. Click it again. See what I'm saying? Works flawless. So let's just go over that flow graph because that was flawless and I didn't change anything. It just wasn't working. That's why, I thought I was doing something wrong, but I wasn't. So we already know what this does. This only sets the entity ID once we left click by checking if it's equal to 1. Yes, go ahead and set it. Then it sends it to a round number. Then it's checking if it's equal to 0 because we don't want to send a 0 value to this. Because when we're clicking on that button, we're also changing it to 0 because it's clicking on the background, which the ground was 0. So I was trying to move the ground and it doesn't work. So we only want to send out values that are the actual entity. So it keeps that entity in, it keeps the valid entity in here because when it's 0, it doesn't output it to here. So it just keeps on using that entity ahead of memory. So when it's not equal to 0, see, false, when these are equal to 0, go ahead and set. Well, what value you want to set? We want to set, the entity that it chose. Then we're going to round it because the input only accepts an integer, so we round it. And put it in. There we go. Now it doesn't matter what we choose. We can choose different objects to add physics to them. And that's cool. With the UI, we're able to do stuff like that, programming language. I want to do something else. I want to take this camera and I want to bring it back a little bit. And I want to select this guy here. Taking this guy and bye-bye, buddy. He's gone. Any dynamic object, anything you click, it moves. Huh? Well, the tree is 0 because it's a see, if I'm clicking on the tree, and if I do this, whoops, I'm clicking the tree, and it's still going to move that last object I had because it's not sending. This is 0, and it's sending out a 0 signal, but it does we told it not to send it out, so it just keeps the one that we had last in memory, just like that. Boom, 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 boom. Pretty cool, guys. Thank you guys for staying with me through this tutorial. I hope you had a lot of fun, and I hope you learned a few things. And if you really like this tutorial, please comment and rate and tell me just how I did. I like to think I did a good job, although I think I was a little bit unclear during the deal of explaining the programming aspect, and that's something I got to work on. But there you go. Pretty cool. All right, thank you guys very much.